Welcome back, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Juan Londoño, and today we are on part 3 of everything tripods. What are they? When do you use them? How do you use them? All the cool stuff on tripods. So the video was recorded as a longer video, and then I broke them up into 3 parts. So let's begin with the rest of this long video, but it's actually part 3 in the series. If you've landed on this video, please stop it, go watch part 1 and then watch part 2 and then come back to this part 3, okay? You can do that by just going below to the channel, click on my little, my picture of me. That'll take you to my channel, look for part number 1 and look for part number 2, right? That way part number 1 is gonna talk about the different types of tripods, and part number 2 is gonna talk about, when do you use a tripod, right? And then today's part number 3 will go into like special considerations that you want to keep in mind. All right, so enjoy the video. Now our next topic is, when do I use a tripod? Do I use it in the evening? Do I use it in the day? Is it made for evening shooting? Most people do, right? They use it in the evenings, but not always, because sometimes the evening you have enough light or you have a flash. So when do you use a tripod? Well, for starters, one of the simplest things is if you're shooting at a shutter speed of less than a 60th of a second, if you're getting into a 30th of a second, a 15th of a second, that means your shutter is going slower and slower. If you're moving while that shutter is opening and closing slowly, then your picture is blurry. So once you get below a 60th of a second, I would say a tripod is probably not a bad thing to use. And that could be in the daytime, maybe under a tree. Maybe it's in the daytime if you have filters on, right? And it forces you to use that lower shutter speed. Or if you're shooting in the evening and you're afraid of shaking, you're shooting something that's still like a building and you're afraid of shaking because the shutter speed is getting a little low, that's definitely a good time to use a tripod. Now, if your subject is moving, a tripod isn't gonna help you, because if I put my camera on this tripod and my shutter speed is very slow, the shutter's staying open for a little while, and I have a little kid running across the screen there, the tripod's not gonna do anything, right? The kid is still moving, right? The tripod can't help me with that. The only thing the tripod is helping me with is my own movement, my own shaking. When I hold this camera and that shutter is opening, staying open for a second, and then closing, any movement on my side, right? Any movement on my behalf, any shake, even my heartbeat will cause a movement, right? That's why you see some photographers, when they're down to like, a 15th of a second, they can make it work if they take a deep breath and hold it and take that picture really, really steady. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You need a tripod. Now, does image stabilization help? Yes, of course it does. It may get you a couple more stops, right? You may be able to shoot at, an 1/8 of a second without any issues, but eventually, there's only so much image stabilization can do. You're gonna need a tripod. And you wanna be safer than sorry, right? You wanna carry one of these around because, God forbid you do need a tripod, you wanna have it, right? You may do a shoot all day and never need the tripod. Oh well, you carried a little extra weight around, you built some muscle, you got some good arms, you got some good legs, you carried this thing around. What did you lose? You lose nothing, right? So I think it's safe to say, right? You want to have some kind of a tripod, light, heavy, whatever you decide, that's up to you. So another reason is panning, right? If you're going to put this camera up here, right? This camera is going to be up on this, and you want to pan, you want to go from left to right, and you're doing the video, wow, you definitely need a tripod. Otherwise, you're going to be going up and down, across the horizon. It's not going to be very nice looking, right? So you want to put the camera on a tripod. You want to start on the left and you want to pan gently all across that beach or the mountains or whatever it is, but you have that steady, even, horizontal feel, right? So panning, you definitely want a tripod. Can you get away with not having it? Yes, of course you can. There's, pros and cons, right? We talk about this. You can do it without the tripod. It's going to be a little harder to get a good result, that's all, right? We talked about equipment. Equipment isn't going to save your life all the time, right? But it makes things easier, right? Will equipment make you a great photographer? No, absolutely not. But if you're already a great photographer, equipment helps you do the job with ease and comfort, right? That's what equipment is for. That's why you pay a little more for the features and the gadgets and the stuff. Because if you already understand photography and you're already getting a lot out of your camera, having this stuff just makes it easy for you, that's all. Another situation is if you're shooting HDR, right? HDR, basically what you do is you shoot multiple pictures of the same thing. One is brighter, one is darker, one is regular. And then it puts all three images together, and that way you get the highlights, you get the shadows, you get everything. Sometimes it's a little funny of an effect depending on what you're doing, but so it's multiple shots basically. That's what HDR is. If you're going to shoot, for example, a mountain or a building, and you're going to use HDR, those things can't move in your picture, right? They shouldn't. Can you do it by hand? Yes. Your software will find the object and will stitch them together, but if you move a lot, then the picture will be cropped because it's going to take out all the edges that ended up, messing up, right? So if you put your camera on a tripod and you shoot those three pictures for that HDR effect, the camera does it automatically, it just shoots three pictures, you know that subject in the background is completely still, it's not moving, and that's what you want. And that brings us to the next one, which is bracketing. HDR is basically bracketing, right? It's light bracketing. It's a lighter image, a darker image, and a regular image. There's bracketing for white balance. There's, you can shoot for one end of the spectrum, the other end of the spectrum, and a normal picture, and then put those three together. There's focus bracketing, where it focuses a little further back, it focuses a little forward, and then it focuses in the middle where you want it, and then it puts all three together, and you get a picture that's focused all through the spectrum. That's fantastic. But you need a tripod because whatever you're shooting at can't move, right? You get the most out of it that way. So bracketing, panning, you want a tripod. And another way to think about bracketing is just basically multiple exposures, right? If you're doing time lapses, if you put the camera on here and you set your camera or you set the shooting device for a time lapse where you're shooting a picture every 10 seconds and you're going to shoot 200 or 300 of them every 10 seconds so you can get the changing of the skies from day to night and the clouds moving and stuff like that, you definitely need a tripod. You're going to find it very difficult to do time-lapse photography without one of these puppies. So definitely invest in a tripod for time-lapse photography. So just real quick, we may do another video on time-lapse, but just because I mentioned it. So why does time-lapse photography? Well, it's like a video. But if you think about a video, what's a video? It's 60 frames per second, 30 frames per second, 120 frames per second. It's a lot of pictures in a second. So when you're looking at a video, it's very smooth because you got a lot done in a second, right? Time-lapse photography, like I mentioned, can be every 3 seconds, every 5 seconds, every 10 seconds. That's very slow. So when you look at the pictures, they tend to be choppy, and you've probably seen this before. Take a look at this sunset, for example, right? It's not your typical sunset. The clouds aren't moving gently across the sky, right? The sun isn't moving gently. This is a sunset, I believe, but you could do it with sunrises as well, right? It's choppy, it's dramatic, it's even a little bit creepy looking, right? But it's a fantastic effect. In another example, you can do it in cities, standing over bridges or shooting at bridges. Time-lapse photography gives you a really cool effect. In this case, we're in Chicago, and you look at the boats, right? It's a very harsh movement. They're not flowing smoothly across the water. They're almost like skipping, right? And that's what time-lapse photography kind of does. It skips a beat, right? And it puts all these pictures back to back, and it looks really cool. The last one is, if you look at this flower, right? It looks like the flower from a creepy movie because the way it opens. It doesn't open smoothly. It opens like in steps, right? It's like a killer flower. So just to sum up, when we use a tripod, it's basically any time you want to make sure that the camera movement isn't going to jeopardize your picture, okay? Or when you need that background to be still in all of your pictures. Those are the two main kind of categories. So now we get into our last category, which is things to consider. This is an important category because when you have a tripod, there are things that we do over time. We get used to it. It's like a habit, right? And then sometimes we do things just because we're not paying attention. Awareness is not there. So this is a good example right here, right? We're back on this hill, and the hill slanted, of course, right? My tripod is tilted. So if you look at this tripod, what I did here is I put one leg down and the other two legs are up here by me. Is that what I want? Well, if you're on a hill like this, that's one leg holding the weight of your camera, right? What makes more sense really in a situation like this is to put two legs on the bottom and one leg up. And that's basically what I call this, two legs down, one leg up, right? Now, you're going to have to extend two legs, in this case, instead of one, because you're gonna have to drop both of these legs so that that tripod is stable and then lock, right? But now you're left with, again, a much more stable setup. You have two legs that are down at the bottom of the hill holding the weight of the camera, and you got this back leg which is kind of just supporting, right, at this point. And that's a little more stable than having just one leg at the bottom and two legs at the top. So something to consider for sure. The other thing is maintenance. Like any other equipment or piece of equipment that you own, we have to take care of it, right? That means that when you're done with a photo shoot, whether it's up in the mountains in dirt, whether it's in the beach with sand, wherever you are, right? Shooting in the foliage with a lot of crunchy leaves that give off all this dust. You want to come home, you want to dust it off. If there are any screws and joints, you want to add a little oil where they need to be. You want to check, make sure you don't do it where it's not supposed to be, right? You don't want to do it up here because it gets all greasy and you're going to be touching it and you're going to be touching your camera and the lenses. So down here, you know, this mechanism, that's where you want to do that, right? You want to probably get a bag for it. You know, I have a bag for my tripods. Sometimes I attach them under my camera bag, in which case they just hang there and I don't use a bag. But if I have a lot of equipment and I have the bag in one shoulder, I usually have the tripod over another shoulder in a bag. That keeps it protected while you're walking along the beach. You know, it's not just the sand at the beach, it's the sand spray. If you've ever been on a beach or spent time, especially if you have glasses, that's when you really notice it. You're just sitting there looking at the waves. When you get back into your car at the end of the day, you take your glasses off, there's a mist, right? And it's that sand, it's the waves lifting up all that spray, right? The water, but it comes with sand. And that stuff coats your equipment. It coats your camera, your lenses, your filters, and definitely your tripods. So you want to come home. These things are typically waterproof. So you want to maybe spray this down, dry it really nice, and then you want to just make sure it's lubricated, right? So take care of it. It's like any other piece of equipment. And this way, it'll last you a lot longer. Something really important to consider is the height. Now, not just the height of the tripod you buy, you want to make sure it has the height that you need, right? When you buy the tripod, make sure, you know, if you're 6 feet and your tripod only comes up to 5, you're going to be squatting over all the time, right? But that brings up a really good point. Most of us get used to raising the tripod to that height where we just have to put the camera on it and then we just look through it. So it's the height of us. What you want to think about when you're using one of these things is, what height do I need to capture the best photo? It's not always going to be the height of my eye, right? It might be the height of my waist. It might be the height of my ankles. If I'm filming somebody walking, you know, it's a little video and I'm filming somebody walking, maybe I just want to get their feet, in which case I'm going to turn this puppy upside down and my camera flip it upside down. You know, there's so many things I can do, right? But my point here is, don't get stuck on setting your tripod to your height all the time, because your pictures will look the same all the time. You want to add a little variety, flexibility into your pictures. So adjust different heights, just like you would if you didn't have this, right? When I don't have this in my hand, I squat. I get down on my knees to shoot different angles, right, through the trees. I get a person down, make them look like they're bigger. I get a little lower, right? Or I get a little higher to make them look like they're smaller. You want to do the same thing with this, right? Don't lose that flexibility and don't lose that creativity just because you have this thing that has a fixed height. Make sure that you vary it, because it isn't a fixed height, right? You can move this around. And if you need it to be a little taller, you may have to put it on a box or on a table or something. Everybody's done that. So keep that flexibility in mind. The tripod should be the height of what you need to shoot, not the height of your eyes. The other thing to consider is the distance to the ground, right? Make sure your tripod legs open up and this tripod comes really low. And in a case like this one, you can turn this thing upside down. I can even take this head and screw it on the bottom. I don't really have to take this leg off like I did, pull it out and invert it, because when I unscrew this thing down here, I can take this head off and just screw it at the bottom. So, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? Whether I pull this out and leave the head, or whether I just take the head off and screw it at the bottom, it's the same thing. My point is, you want to make sure that there is some kind of a minimum shooting distance from the ground. If you get a tripod like this one, right? This tripod, it's not going to go down very far. Even if I open these legs all the way, I'm going to have this bar that I have to contend with, right? This is always going to be up here if I open these legs wide, right? So I'm always going to be limited to like, you know, 1.5 feet of height from the ground, especially when you add the camera to this thing. So I'm definitely limiting myself. I can take that with me, and it's going to be mostly like, you know, landscape shooting. I'm not going to take that with me if I'm doing little flowers and insects and stuff like that. That's when I take this with me. So that's why you see what's going to start happening is you're going to have different tripods. This is very light. If there's a strong gust of wind, if I'm by a river somewhere and the wind is constantly blowing, not the best tripod for me. That other tripod is going to be really good for that, right? So the point here, the minimum distance to the ground, very important, and it's something to consider. Now you saw me flip one of these little rubber things off, right? You want a tripod that gives you the option of rubber and these metal tips, right? Sometimes you need these, right? When you're in rocky areas, these rubber things slide all over the rocks. You need these metal tips. And in some hard dirt, you need this too, right? This is not gonna do much. But if you're shooting indoors and you're like on a marble floor, you're shooting the inside of a hotel lobby or something, these legs slip around and slide around, and they introduce more instability to your tripod. It's not very, very safe even for your equipment. Then you want these rubber legs. This is very simple. They snap off and they snap on. They're pretty tight. I don't think they're gonna get lost. So the other tripod I showed you, the heavier one, doesn't have those metal you know, tips. It's just a rubber. And back 20 years ago, you know, I guess it was already a thing. I'm not sure if it was or not, but it definitely is a thing today. So, you know, again, look for those things because it gives you another option, something to consider. Something to consider in the world of tripods, where you're headed, right? We talked about it. Are you going to a beach that's really windy, or are you going to a mountain and you're surrounded by trees? Do you have to hike 5 or 7 miles before you get up there? Are you going to take something lighter? Are you going to take something heavier? Are you going to take something smaller? Do you need something taller, right? So before you plan your trip, that's one of the things you'll have to figure out. Which tripod am I going to take? If you're starting out, you're just going to have one tripod. It's not going to be a big deal. But as you get more into photography, you know, you have that one tripod and you realize your limitations. It doesn't work for every situation. And then you end up buying that other tripod. And then that doesn't work. Those two don't work for every situation. So you end up buying that third one. And then you're going to have decisions to make. Which one am I taking with me? Is there ever going to be a need to take both or 2 of them? Maybe, right? So just consider that. The weight of the camera is something to consider. If I'm putting a point and shoot on a tripod, then something like this is fine. This is it. This is all I have to carry. But if I'm putting my 5D Mark III on there with my 70 to 200 millimeter lens, you know, that's not even a topic, right? It's a non-issue. Something like this is a minimum requirement. This might be a little light. I mean, it'll hold the weight, right? But it might, with a gust of wind, this is not going to be as stable as that other tripod I have, right? But it'll do the job, right? If there isn't a lot of wind, this is fine, right? So the point here is make sure that your tripod can handle the weight of your equipment, right? Many of these tripods, you can hang things from the bottom, like a bag, like your photography bag. This has a clip down here. I don't know if you can see it. And you can hang, right? You can hang a bag from that little clip. That makes it even more stable. That's you know, I didn't even mention that, but if you have your photography bag, you clip it on here. When this thing is tall, right? And your photography, that's one place to put your bag so it's not sitting on the floor in case it's wet, and it keeps your tripod grounded, right? So that's why they give you these little hooks down here so you can hang stuff from them. Most tripods now have that, especially the ones that get a little more serious. The other thing to consider is, how long do you want to keep it? Are you a new photographer, you're not even sure, and you don't mind if your $20 tripod dies in a year because, you know, you're either going to be out of photography or you're going to be, you know, head in, and then you're going to get something better, then maybe it's not a bad idea. Get a $20 tripod, right? If you're already a photographer, if you love photography and you want something good that's going to last, like I bought that tripod that it's 20 years in and it looks the same as when I bought it, then you want to spend a little more money on a tripod and you want to take care of it. One other thing to consider, the safety of the place where you're going, right? Are you going to a rough neighborhood? Are you traveling to a country that you're not aware of and you don't know what back streets you're going to be in? In that case, you want a smaller photography bag. maybe even like a mirrorless camera that doesn't draw a lot of attention when you're holding it. And there are some amazing mirrorless cameras. I'm filming on the M6 Mark II, and I could take that anywhere with some decent lenses and shoot wonderful pictures. And it doesn't look like I have this really big, serious camera. People are just going to blow me off as a tourist, right? So if I'm going to use a tripod, I want my tripod to be maybe just a little bigger than this, right? I don't want it to draw a lot of attention. At worst, this collapses pretty nicely. I have this thing in the back of my bag hanging, and I can walk around cities like Paris or, in some tougher neighborhoods. And I'm not going to look like a big photographer. I'm just going to look like a tourist that needs to use a tripod, basically, right? So where you're going is going to decide, the safety of where you're going is going to decide. You don't want a big fancy tripod and a big DSLR and all that stuff if you're going into a rough neighborhood. If you are, then, you want some backup with you, right? And the final thing to consider is just reviews. When you're going to buy something, even if you look at the ones in my description, right? Go into the link and then read the reviews. Because you know what? Even if it has 4.5 stars and 20,000 people have bought it, that's good enough for me typically. But you read the reviews because the things they're raving about might not be the things that you and I need, right? They may be good things for a videographer, or they may be good things for somebody who's shooting a very specific topic. So read a dozen of the reviews. It doesn't take any time to do that, right? And decide if that sounds like a good tripod for you. So conclusion, if you're even mildly serious about photography, this is indispensable, right? This is not even a topic. If you're even slightly interested in doing some creative stuff in photography, you need a basic tripod, right? The links are below in the description. Check out the ones that I've reviewed here today. And then feel free to roam around, right? If you don't like these, feel free to get something else. The point is, you want to get what's right for you and you want to be happy using it. And don't worry, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, right? You can give it to a friend, sell it cheap, and then look for something else. We've all done that as well. If this video was useful, if you think you got something out of it, if you think there's something here that one of your friends or relatives can use, please like it, comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know any suggestions. Please share it, of course, like we mentioned. And if you're not subscribed, subscribe. I'll keep the content coming. I'll keep cool topics coming. I've got another really cool topic coming for next week. So until then, thank you for your time. And I hope that you can use this knowledge to become an even better photographer. Till the next time, stay safe, wear your mask, drink your vitamin C, stay healthy, and ciao for now.